Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching. Alice sat in front of the mirror, beside which were all covered with jars with makeup and cosmetics, and turned from a 20-year-old pretty blonde with gray eyes into a witch with long black braids and looked like a 70-year-old grandmother. She chose a matching costume, too, a long black hooded robe with a half face and a wooden stick with a snake head on the handle. She had a big day today. There was a New Year's Eve party at a big bank, and she had been booked for a marquee fortune-telling, a sort of theatrical production to amuse the guests. They promised very good pay. The event was held outside the city, so they sent a company cab to pick her up at the appointed time. The way was not a short distance, and on the way, Alice looked out the window at the trees flying by, studded with snow, and was sad remembering her beloved grandmother, who died just a couple of months ago. The thing is that her grandmother, Varvara, was a fortune teller and a healer. The whole village went to her for treatment and good advice. Her herbs always smelled in her house, so that it made me dizzy. The old woman knew absolutely all herbs and always gathered them before sunrise on certain days. She even knew how to prepare various ointments, rubrics, and made special herbal gatherings for various illnesses. The healer could easily cure spinal hernia, sprains, headache, or intestinal problems. Many took small children to her to treat stuttering and bedwetting. Grandma helped absolutely everyone, no matter if a person had money or not, and even at night she would get out of bed and run to the patient if the case was urgent. When she held a person's hand, she would tell him or her what she saw. Everything came true down to the last detail, even if it seemed unbelievable. Everyone knows that such a gift is passed on through generations, so from childhood Alice sometimes could guess the future by hand. This happened on a hunch, and not very often. For example, one day, quite accidentally, a teacher at school took her by the hand to help her with an exercise. The girl looked at her strangely, then said, "Your daughter is in trouble. She needs help. She is crying and is afraid to tell you. Help her." Veronica at first did not believe it, thinking that Alice just imagines copying a grandmother. However, when she came home, looked closely at her daughter, she really looked confused and scared. She had been bullied and extorted money, and even her phone had been taken away. The very next day, the entire school was buzzing that Elisa really did have a gift, just like her grandmother. But it manifested itself only sometimes, on very rare occasions. But when my grandmother began to weaken, fail, and often sick, she still gave her granddaughter all the secrets and wisdom, but she warned, "I'll teach you, Alice, all I knew, but you use your gift only as a last resort. Heavy is the burden. Not everyone can bear to be responsible for someone else's destiny. You can lose your own happiness that way." It just so happened that in her 20s the girl was all alone on this earth. Her beloved grandmother died so suddenly, just did not wake up in the morning, and that's all. Her heart stopped in her sleep. Alice still could not come to terms with this loss. But that was not all the hardships that fell on the shoulders of the unhappy girl. The groom, whom she madly loved and is in full preparation for the wedding, expecting to live with him happily ever after, treacherously betrayed and left her, even before he found out that she was pregnant. All of this at once piled up and literally crushed Alice. She cried day and night. Her stomach began to hurt, and there was a threat of failure. The doctor sternly warned her that if she didn't pull herself together, she might lose the baby. Alice certainly did not want that, so she resolutely pulled herself together, bought a sedative tea, and set a goal, no matter what, to get out of depression and raise your child alone. So she had to remember her gift and, despite her grandmother's warning, use it to survive somehow. The girl placed an ad in the newspaper and on the internet. "I will help you see the past and the future, all honestly and without deception. Contact me anytime, Cassandra," and gave her phone number. Little by little, she began to go door knocked door to those who wanted to read her fortune. She had read many times about the ancient Greek seer who had foreseen the fall of Troy, and she was admired for her gift of foresight. Alice worked honestly, never cheated. All that she predicted came true always. She many times called her to her place. They paid generously, although she did not set the price. It cannot do in any case, otherwise the gift can be lost forever. Her grandmother warned her of this at once. Never ask for money. Whatever you give thanks for, you should be content with. The gift should come from a pure heart. And remember that you can only see the fate of a stranger. You can't help a loved one. There's nothing you can do. For each of her outings, Alice made herself up carefully, as she was still very shy about what she did and didn't want to be recognized. She purposely bought green lenses and a black wig with long hair, and dressed in layered long clothes and puffy skirts to create the image of a fortune teller. After all, an elderly person is more likely to be believed no matter how you look at it. Finally, the chauffeur turned to the chic restaurant of the recreation center, which was literally in the middle of the forest, and brought the girl out of her memories. He said, "All right, dear, we've arrived. Straight ahead and to the left. There's a banquet hall. I called the manager. They are waiting for you." Alice was worried because for the first time she performs in front of a large number of people in public. She was shaking and nauseous. Toxicosis from worrying only increased, plus hot clothes and makeup did not allow to breathe. It seemed quite short of air. A lot of other people were waiting for her turn backstage. Magicians with a huge hat, some variety group, and even an animal trainer, with a funny monkey dressed up as a real fashionista. And here she comes out. The program host announced into the microphone the next number. "Attention, attention. Now each guest of this evening will have a unique opportunity to learn about their past and future. And this is not a joke because Cassandra came to us. The famous witch and fortune teller, please welcome." On her bent legs from excitement, Alice came into the center of the hall, greeted the honored audience with a gesture, and went to the improvised tent, where there was a beautiful spinning magic ball where everything was smoky, twirling, and shimmering, just like in a fairy tale, and began to wait for the first client. The first to arrive was, of course, the bank manager, Stern Adam. He initially tried to avoid it, considering it all foolishness and nonsense, and the mood was not a good one. Business at the bank was getting worse and worse. Profits were weak and customers were for some reason migrating to the competition. He could not yet figure out the reason. So he entered the tent, dryly greeted, scowled, and silently held out his hand, looking at the woman who posed as a witch. The disguised Alice looked at the hand, walked over it, as if reading the information, then, according to the script, wizened over the magic ball, driving her hands and whispering something, and suddenly gave out, "You are the director of this bank. You have big financial problems. Loans are not given, and income catastrophically falling. If things go on like this, very soon the bank will not hold out and simply will burst. You are confused and do not know what to do. Most importantly, you cannot understand what is the reason. That is why the mood is as bad as can be. The only thing that makes you happy is that your daughter is getting married soon, and you hope that this union will also help you. You love her very much, and you are worried that the son-in-law was honest and decent. I'm done." The man opened his mouth in surprise, amazed at what he heard. "Wow! I thought it was pure deception. But what you told me, not a single soul knows. You described it all so accurately. My respects." And he left the tent puzzled and invited his deputy there. When the next client entered, Alice physically felt bad. She almost vomited and felt dizzy. After all, standing in front of her was none other than her unsuccessful fiancé, Arthur. The man was expensive and stylishly dressed, a suit and patent leather shoes, impeccable styling. He behaved swaggeringly, was already quite tipsy, and, of course, did not recognize Alice in her makeup. And so he said, "Well, Cassandra, go on. Tell me a big lie to please me. What's waiting for me there? She tried to suppress her anger and excitement. She took Arthur's hand and saw a very unpleasant picture. Here he was making an agreement with the accomplices, one of them working for the competitors, and decides to ruin the director and to bankrupt the bank. They conceived and devised a whole operation, and just in order to have direct access to all accounts and papers, he decides to marry Adam's daughter, Betty, though he does not love her at all and even despises her, considering her just a stupid rich fool. And it's for her that he leaves Alice. So that's what it's all about. At that very moment, before her eyes suddenly flew a string of recent memories, all swept by, as if the frames of a movie. Here she is at the gynecologist. She sent her to the ultrasound. Alice is already worried and assumes the worst. It was not for nothing she began to feel so nauseous, especially in the morning. Just no force. The girl was trained as a doctor, so immediately understood what it was, but she still hoped that maybe just the body gave failure, for example, on a nervous breakdown. When a specialist at the ultrasound confirmed pregnancy, and even showed her the very spot, smaller than a poppy seed, which was already a baby, began to congratulate her on it, she could hardly contain her sobs and tried with all her might not to give her condition, and the doctor went on. Well, why are you so upset? Everything is fine with the baby. Come in a week. We will put you on the registry. Are you worried that you are still young and cannot cope? In vain, believe me, the child. This is the greatest happiness in a woman's life, and the experience of caring for the baby will come on its own. The nurse will help. And you cannot cry. The baby feels everything. Try to give him, even in the womb, only positive emotions. Pull yourself together, get dressed, and take care of yourself. Send in the next patient, please. But the girl didn't seem to hear him at all. She barely squeezed out of herself. Goodbye. Goodbye. She ran up the stairs at a breakneck speed. She couldn't breathe, and the office seemed unbearably stuffy. She exposed her heated face to the cool wind and burst into tears in the middle of the street, not shying away from passers-by, who were staring at her in wonder. Only one thought was beating in her head. What an idiot I am, idiot, after all, Grandma warned, and I did not believe it. And now what? How am I going to come and tell her all this? I can imagine how she will react. She'll probably scold me. The whole thing is that Alice's mom, when she was her age, got burned the same way, believed in love, and got pregnant, and the guy dumped her or laughed and snuck out to someone else. That's what he said. You got her pregnant. You bring her up. I had nothing to do with it. I don't need a yoke around my neck. All the neighbors talked about it and laughed at Naomi. Varvara stood up to defend her daughter, quickly shut everyone's mouth, although she herself, of course, was also uncomfortable with all this, and it was a pity for Naomi. She was a good student, a promising one, and this scoundrel had to come her way. But she kept a low profile, consoling her daughter as best she could, encouraging her and setting her up positively. If only she could have foreseen what awaits them ahead. But, unfortunately, the map of a loved one's fate is closed to the fortune teller. But that was just the beginning of their birth curse. Mom died right during childbirth. A blood clot broke off, and the newborn granddaughter had to be taken from the maternity ward by her grandmother, Varvara. After Naomi's death, they lived together in the village. Grandmother was not easy to raise her granddaughter on her feet, being at an advanced age. But she tried to make sure that Alice dressed and looked no worse than the other children at school, regularly bought her new clothes, and spoiled her with goodies. Alice and her grandmother were the best of friends. They talked at length about life. Varvara taught the girl not to rush to open her heart and trust people. Every time she reminded her how things ended with her mother and asked her not to repeat her mistakes. She repeated her thoughts to her granddaughter like a mantra. Remember, little girl, first go to university, get a good job, and then think about your family. Choose a man by his deeds, not by his words. They can all sing sweetly. Don't be in a hurry, look hard. Yours won't run away from you. The girl went to medical college and left for the capital, for the university grandmother did not have money, of course. Elisa was provided with a dormitory on benefits and was assigned a social stipend. Studying she liked. She tried her best and took on any part-time work and errands in the dean's office, since life in the capital was oh so not cheap. With her grandmother they regularly called because the closest person to Alice and then did not have. She told her by phone about all the progress, shared her impressions, and every time Varvara at the end of a conversation reminded her, "Look, my little granddaughter, do not give in to temptations. They are in a big city. Be smart. Think only about school, and leave grooms and love for later." But Alice, as if by some evil stroke of fate, totally repeated everything according to her mother's scenario. She met Arthur in a business center. Alice took there a package of documents on behalf of the dean of the department, and the man was going from important negotiations. They literally bumped heads near the elevator, and both dropped all the papers. Then they laughed for a long time and put them back together. That's how they met. This gray-eyed, natural blonde with long, smooth like a mirror, hair and such a naive look from under her fluffy lashes immediately attracted the experienced womanizer. He, as a hunting dog, immediately picked up the trail. First, he invited her to the cafeteria, which was located right there in the building. They drank coffee and chatted nicely. Arthur fell into the girl's heart so deeply, literally won her over at first sight. Well, how? A grown-up, intelligent businessman knows how to court and pay compliments. For Alice, which was the first experience of relationships, he seemed like a knight on a white horse. Everything spun so quickly, she did not even have time to blink her eyes. Baskets of roses, trips to restaurants, trips to the night capital so turned her head that she could not resist and succumbed to temptation. She believed in love, she thought. Here it is, my happiness like in the movies. Anna was literally bathed in tenderness fiancée. He lovingly called her Little Mermaid, swore to be faithful to the grave and love all his life. Such words whispered in her ear. She was saddened by one thing. Her betrothed did not hurry to acquaint her with either her friends or parents. It was always just the two of them. Alice wanted to introduce Arthur to her friends and invite him to her dormitory. The girls really wanted to look at his fiancée, but he flatly refused and sharply replied, "Alice, I do not have the status of the dorms to run around. And what am I to talk about with frivolous girls? This is not my level, and I do not have many friends, more business partners. I only meet with them for business matters. What's with the whimsy? Is it bad for both of us? Or do you have a problem with our relationship?" The girl was frightened, and she began to babble. "No." "What are you saying?" "I love you very much, and I'm happy with you. I'm sorry if I offended you. I don't want to quarrel. The evening is wonderful." The guy smiled. "What a clever girl. I love an understanding girl. Come here, my doll, I'll caress you." And the couple merged in a passionate kiss. Alice immediately forgot about everything on earth, sinking into the abyss of pleasure. It ended as suddenly as it began. Arthur just disappeared, not picking up the phone and ignoring his fiancée. Alice cried, suffered, understood nothing. She lay for 24 hours, turned her back to the wall, and grieved. She did not want to see anyone. Phone did not let go from his hands at all hoping suddenly Arthur will call her, and everything will be clarified. But time passed, and the phone was stubbornly silent. It seemed to her as if the hands of the clock had stopped and did not move at all. Girls in the room advised her, poke around his work and straight talk. Set the record straight, or forget it. Well, you cannot be so heart-wrenching that. Alice chose the first option, and even decided to follow the groom, and found out that he was going to marry a rich bride. Every day he led her tenderly by the hand, opened the door of the salon, helped her to sit down, and just like Alice, gave her armfuls of roses. Of course, this dressed up in an expensive mink coat and crocodile leather boots, platinum blonde, could not compare with how Alice looked in her old down jacket and puffed boots. And still, she was so hurt and hurt. Why did he swear his love for her? Was he cheating on her head? So he didn't love her a bit, but just used her like a cheap toy. And now he's played with it, forgotten it, thrown it away. She waited for him in the parking lot and sobbed and asked, "Arthur, what's going on? Are we no longer a couple? Why? Didn't you say you loved me? Where did you disappear to? Don't you answer your phone? You don't call." The guy looked at her as if she were a complete stranger, an empty space, and said coldly, "Stop playing games. Stop being so silly. Well, we had our fun, and I think we both enjoyed it. And now I have a change of plans. Sorry, I'm getting married. So let's part as friends. And don't follow me. Have some pride. Is not it clear that if a man does not call, then he is no longer interested in you?" Alice was so angry that she slapped him with a swing and shouted, "Friends, you used me, and now you're throwing me an unnecessary thing and so quietly declare it. Oh, to hell with you. I hate you." And she ran away in tears, and Arthur rubbed his cheek and shouted, "Fuck you, you hysterical girl. You're such a princess, and I'll have 1,000,000 more of them. You're a country bumpkin. You're lucky I showed you the capital. And she fights too." The girl was sobbing day and night. She felt so bad, bitter, resentful, and sick to her stomach. She was thrown into the trash like an old torn shoe. And then there was this pregnancy on top of it. Alice came home from the hospital, and the first thing she did was call her grandmother. "Grandma, darling, forgive me, I'm such an idiot. You have warned me 100 times. Now I do not know what to do. I feel so bad. Arthur, my fiancé, left me for another rich bride. And then I found out I was pregnant. How can I go on living? Maybe I should get an abortion before it's too late. Otherwise, God forbid, everything turns out like my mother's. The term is still small. Who will need me then, alone and with a baby in his arms? What if I die in childbirth too?" Grandma's voice became agitated, and she all shouted into the tube, "Don't you dare even think about it. Killing your child is a terrible sin. Do not cry. Do not grieve, my granddaughter. We will bring up our great-grandson too. Where will we go? And this scoundrel who did such a mean thing to you, life will punish him. You know that. Come to the village for the weekend. We'll talk about everything." But it was not their destiny to talk. Grandma died so suddenly and hastily. She was already a respectable age. Granddaughter barely survived the funeral. She was literally dragged away from the coffin. She howled and called for her grandmother and could not imagine how she would live alone. After all, she was all alone on this earth. And now, 3 months later, Alice again meets the will of fate, rascal Arthur. His harsh voice brought her out of her memories. "What are you there, fell asleep, or what, old woman? What awaits me?" Alice pulled herself together and in a guttural voice, trying not to give herself away, replied, "I'm just shocked by what I see. You expect untold wealth, marriage to a beautiful woman, and a rich life, only happiness and joy ahead. You're a darling of fortune. The heavens themselves patronize you. Money will literally rain gold. You will not be able to deny yourself anything at all." Satisfied Arthur blurted out in a self-satisfied smile, "Well, that's right. So it should be. I am a good man. I have never done harm to anyone. I have never hurt anyone. So I should by right be always lucky. You made me happy, old woman. Here, take it. I earned it." And he threw her a crumpled bill of 100 rubles from his pocket. Alice was filled with hatred for this bastard. She wanted straight away to claw at his face and tell him what she had seen and what he was really worth. But another employee peeked into the tent. "Emos, where have you been? Let's go get a drink. Then it's my turn." and led the tipsy deputy out of the tent. Alice, with great difficulty, finished her speech, as literally all tipsy staff decided to find out what awaits them in destiny. What she saw threw her into shock. It turned out that at least 3 other people secretly passed all the information to competitors and even slipped the bank director to sign fake documents, being in cahoots with them. Yeah, well, Adam had a snake-haired team. No wonder his bank, like the Titanic, was sinking fast. When the show ended, Alice drew away from the director. Adam, though it was not easy, and whispered to him, "Excuse me, I need to talk to you urgently in private, so that no one heard us. I have very important information for you." The man was surprised, but did not ask her anything and showed her where to go. They went out through the backyard and into the next house. There were hotel private apartments there. It was all nice and well maintained and done in an old style, like a castle. The director opened the room with his key and said, "Come in. This is my personal suite, like an office. I sometimes come here to rest or to work in silence, so that nobody disturbs me. At home there are always problems, noise, ruckus, guests often come. I don't always manage to concentrate. So what's on your mind? I'm listening." Alice began to change clothes and took off her makeup in the bathroom. When she came out, an ordinary girl in jeans and a sweater, the director even whistled. "Wow, what a transformation. You turn out to be a beauty, and so young I did not expect. You look just like my daughter Betty. You look great." Alice started babbling. "Adam, listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you. Your deputy Emos is the worst kind of bastard. He and his associates want to bankrupt you. Not only that, but 3 more of your employees, Francis, Jacob, and Charles, are leaking all the information to your competitors. And you just recently, the day before yesterday, signed a fake contract. You also don't know the most important thing. Arthur is my ex-boyfriend. He dumped me and decided to marry your daughter. But he doesn't love her at all. He just wants to get close to your accounts and paperwork so he can finish his evil deed, you know? And I'm pregnant by that bastard. Phew, I think I've said it all." Adam, incredulous, looked at Alice, unable to accept and digest the information he had heard. "Something looks too fantastic. Maybe you made it all up on purpose, out of revenge that your fiancé left you. Are you sure you know what you're saying? Arthur does his job brilliantly. I have no problems with him." "I don't know what to say," Alice replied. "You can think what you want, but I have no reason to lie. I just wanted to warn you, and then do as you please. I have to go. Goodbye." The director hesitated and pulled out an impressive wad of money. "Yes, of course, not delaying. Here, thank you for the performance." The guests were delighted. They all loved it. Have a good one. Adam stayed up all night thinking about the words of that strange fortune teller. On the one hand, everything she was telling him was very improbable. The feeling that he was in the den of traitors and enemies. But on the other hand, about the daughter and the bad deeds of the bank, she told the truth. Maybe she wasn't lying about the rest either. The director decided to double-check everything, just in case. The first thing, he secretly put everywhere you can, hidden cameras, and secondly, invited an independent auditing company with verification, expertise in computer systems. They shoveled all the reports and accounting documents. And thirdly, he hired a private detective to follow Arthur. What they were able to find out a week later threw the director into shock. Fortune teller was 100% right. Arthur really had accomplices. One of them an employee of a rival bank. The villains had conceived so cunning and masterful plan of bankruptcy that if it were not for Cassandra, they would have succeeded for sure. Along the way, they had caught the thieving accountant and 2 from the legal department in the act. But worst of all, scumbag Arthur, not in the least embarrassed, played around on the side and cheated on Betty right and left, and changed girls like gloves. The private detective provided a lot of photos and other evidence. The banker came home and called his daughter into his office. "Betty, listen, I need to talk to you seriously. It's a shitty case. I will not hide it. You know that I am a straightforward man. I will not lie. Here, see for yourself. In my opinion, there's no need to comment." And he threw a stack of pictures on the table, where Arthur passionately kisses and is engaged in intimacy with one lady, then another. The pictures are fresh, all taken this week. Betty rounded her eyes and cried, "No, Daddy, I don't believe it. It must be a photo montage. Arthur isn't like that. He loves me. Are you trying to break us up on purpose? He really wasn't home last night, but you had an important business meeting late at the restaurant. I did not even scold him. Business is business. I understand everything." The man added, "We didn't have any business meeting last night. That's the point. That cheeky bastard is cheating on you. You know, it's a good thing we found out now before the wedding. Otherwise it would have been harder. He also loved a nice girl before you and left her pregnant. That's not an argument either. Okay, here, listen to this. It's a nightclub tape." The voice was definitely Arthur's. He was cooing with some girl. "My sweet Florence, I bought you for the night. Come to me, my chick." And a woman's voice. "Of course, my good man, I'll grant your every wish. What about your fiancée? Won't she be jealous if she finds out? I don't need any trouble." Arthur laughed and replied, "What will that stupid hen notice? She's madly in love with me, so she won't suspect a thing. And she makes me sick. No face, no skin, and she's a total log in bed. And yet Daddy's a bank manager. I only need her for a while, for something important, and then I'll dump her right away." Drunk Arthur talked and talked, but Betty turned off the tape and cried bitterly on her father's shoulder. "How could it be, Daddy? Didn't he swear his love? He said he would take care of me. I believed him. I love him. I'd die without him." Adam caressed his treasure. "What are you talking about, silly? I'll die to you. This scoundrel is not worth it. You are the most precious thing I have. Everything will be fine. You will still meet a decent guy who will love you truly, sincerely. You deserve it, believe me. Take an example from Alice. This bastard also left her pregnant, and she is not discouraged. And with the scoundrel Arthur and other dark horses in my bank, I will deal with tomorrow at the meeting. They will not be little, believe me." The very next day, Adam called an emergency meeting where trashed the subordinates. Employees were quite surprised when he put in front of them a pile of papers, confirming the involvement of some allegedly proven people who no one could never think to participate in shady dealings. Arthur and his team flew out of the bank with a wolf ticket, and the accountant too. Moreover, a criminal case was opened against them for stealing large sums of money. Now, everything became clear to the director of the bank, why things were going so badly. He wondered how, with such a team in general, is not still bankrupt. Adam connected all his connections and made sure that the scoundrel was deprived of everything he had gained illegally, and no self-respecting company would hire him now. Another 2 weeks passed. Alice was still going out to see clients and guessing, attending lectures at college, when suddenly the phone rang. On the other end of the line was Adam himself. "Good afternoon, Alice. This is the director of the Bank Capital Plus. I have a business proposition to you, because all of your predictions have come true with precision to the smallest detail. I would like to invite you to work for me. A personal consultant. You will be required to be present at all important deals and negotiations, and tell me if your partners are unreliable or are up to no good. That's all. I promise not to hurt money. What do you say?" Alice stunned. Such an opportunity, not every time falls. And she gladly agreed to Adam's proposal. She really does not need an extra penny right now. There would be so much to buy for the baby. So from the next Monday, Alice was enrolled at the bank as a consultant. She was present at negotiations, kept up a casual conversation, and as if casual conversation, and as if casually touched the hand of a partner and clearly saw what he had in mind. Thanks to her, managed to conclude 4 lucrative deals and prevent 2 dark ones. So the banker was quite satisfied with Alice. In addition, he introduced her to his daughter, Betty, because they were the same age, and women are very friends, often went to a cafe, ate ice cream, and in their own way, in girlish, chatted. It turned out they had a lot in common. Betty, despite the fact that she grew up in a wealthy family, was a very good and simple person, not arrogant, and just like Alice, because of his credulity and naivety, fell into the trap of the villain Arthur. She was tempted by the compliments and honeyed speeches, and only thanks to Alice, she was able to recognize the villain in time and take him out in the open. One day, Alice was walking home from work and saw how a pack of dogs attacked the purebred beautiful dog with an expensive collar. He clung to the wall, but the pack was huge, and the forces were clearly not equal. She felt so sorry for the poor fellow that she grabbed a huge stick and began to disperse the frenzied at the sight of the blood of the pack, though she was frightened herself, to tell the truth. She didn't want to be bitten in her condition. With great difficulty, she managed to wrestle the dog away. It whimpered and fell back on one paw. It was oozing blood, and its ear was also torn to shreds. She did not hesitate and took the dog to a veterinary clinic. They had to pay a pretty penny, but the dog was treated. The wound was stitched up and treated. Antibiotic shots were prescribed. Already at home, she fed the poor dog and examined his collar. On the backside was written a phone number. Alice, without thinking, dialed the number. On the other end of the line, she heard a pleasant man's voice. "Good afternoon. I'm listening." The girl said timidly, "Hello, my name is Alice. I have your dog. He wandered down the street, apparently lost, and he was attacked by dogs. I barely fought him off. But don't worry, the wound has been stitched up. I took the dog to the vet. They helped him professionally." The man shouted in a disconnected voice, "Wait. How wounded and wandering down the street. He's supposed to be at home, looked after. I wondered why my wife wasn't answering the phone. The dog's name is Richie. My name is Evan. I'm a trucker on a trip. I'll be back in a few days to pick him up. Just don't drive him away. Can he stay with you for a while?" Alice reassured the man, "Don't worry, I have not rescued it in order to throw out. The address I will send you in a message now, and for Richie, do not worry. We will get along with him. Can you tell me what he eats usually? I don't really know dog food. Thank you so much. He is the most faithful friend I have ever had." The dog really turned out to be very smart and clever. Now Alice got up an hour earlier in the morning and walked with him in the park, and after work too. He licked her hands and tickled her with his rough tongue. He also gave her a funny paw. Alice would buy him treats and bones on purpose, as a treat to go with his food. Richie appreciated it and joyfully jumped up and down, wagging his tail. 3 days flew by and the owner came to get the dog. It turned out to be a pleasant-looking young man. Green-eyed, brown-haired man with expressive, deep, and so sad eyes. He said hello from the threshold. "Good afternoon. Are you Alice? I'm Evan. I'm here to pick up Richie. Thank you so much for saving him and taking him in. I am eternally in your debt." Richie heard his host's voice and smelled him, and immediately ran into the hallway and jumped right onto his neck. He just fell over Evan, licking his face, and there were tears of joy in his eyes. It was so touching that Alice cried too. "God, it's so good that you found each other. I saw how the dog misses, how it suffers without an owner. Dogs are the most loyal creatures in the world. Come into the kitchen. I'll make you a cup of tea, and we'll talk at the same time. Can you tell me how Richie got lost?" Evan became sad. He lowered his head and began his story. "It's not a funny story. While I was on the road, my wife had a boyfriend and ran off with him, and she threw Richie out on the street so he wouldn't bother her. I still can't believe it. Arrived no belongings, no money I had worked so hard to earn. No belongings, no money I had worked so hard to earn. No dog, but that's not surprising. Matey never liked me. I was the one who fell in love like a fool. When I saw her, I was lost. She's such a beautiful redhead and she's shapely. Any model would envy her. Of course, she knew what she was worth. She liked to dress fancy and wear expensive trinkets. She hadn't studied or worked, but that didn't put me off either. We started living together in my apartment. Almost everything I earned she spent only on herself. She didn't like Richie, and he didn't like her very much. Muddy kept telling me that a dog in my apartment was horrible and unhygienic, and we should give him away. But I wouldn't even listen to that. I raised him from a tiny little puppy, fed him by the hour, vaccinated him, treated him. I love him like my own child. He's part of my family. That's the reason we fought all the time. Plus, I really wanted kids, but Maddie wouldn't have them. She said it would ruin her figure. It's too early. And she made it a condition. It was either a dog or a baby. How could I just throw the dog out? Well, this is a betrayal. And the last 6 months we lived worse and worse, all the time fighting. The neighbors began to tell me that she came home late at night and to visit her some men. But I didn't believe it to the last. Thought so women's gossip. And so I waited until she completely ran away. So I'm a cuckolding husband, the classic version. That's what I'm doing with Richie. I'm filing for divorce. Why are you alone? So pretty and young. Alice sighed heavily too. You're not the only one. I'm also an idiot. What little. I fell in love with a guy, thought we would marry. He swore eternal love to me, and then just like that, and disappeared. Turns out he dumped me for a rich bride. After we broke up, I found out I was pregnant. The 4th month. So it's no fun either. I'm going to be a single mother. No one needs me. Well, you have to believe in good things. And don't get discouraged. Evan was gibbering. That's right, Alice. You have someone to live for. After all, the baby, it's so happy. Do not despair. Can Richie and I come and see you? We'll go for a walk together. It will be good for you and your baby, and it will be good for you and your baby, and it will be a pleasure for me and Richie. Do you mind? Alice smiled. Of course I don't mind. I'll miss Richie. I'm so fond of him. He's so good and obedient and kind. I don't know why anyone would dislike him. I'll see you later. Bye, my good man. She patted the dog by the ear. The dog wagged his tail and licked her hands. A couple of days passed. Alice thought to herself that she missed Evan very much. She was very pleased with this man. For some reason, it was so easy and good. But Alice immediately told herself, forget it. You're expecting a child from another man. Why do you need Evan? And you with such a burden to him. Evan is just a good acquaintance and the owner of the best dog. When the guy came to her house again with Richie and invited her for a walk, the girl's heart raced and she was very excited to meet him. The couple had a fun and interesting time, Richie making them laugh with somersaults and flips, barking mischievously and bring a stick. So gradually, the couple became very close. They talked a lot, went to visit each other. Between them there was a tremendous attraction. Like a magnet, Evan cared for and helped Alice, because the tummy was growing by leaps and bounds. He tried to help carry heavy bags and went with her to young parenting classes, listening to how to care for the baby, so that she would not be sad and lonely there. After all, most expectant mothers went there with their husbands. Not only that, Evan suddenly changed jobs abruptly, they said, not to leave the dog alone, and moved to the city cab service as a driver. Now they saw each other a lot more often. In fact, Evan fell in love with Alice the moment she saved his pet. He immediately realized that she had a kind and compassionate heart. And when the charming, gray-eyed beauty with a cute little figure opened the door to him, he completely lost his head. He was not embarrassed by Alice's pregnancy. Evan just adored children because he had 3 younger brothers. He came from a large family. Evan had fun growing up. We were friends. We stood up for each other, we fought. Everything happened. But it certainly wasn't boring. That's why the boy dreamed that his own family would be like that. But in his feelings, he was categorically afraid to admit it. He did not know how Alice will take it all, whether it will push him away, and decided to just be there, like a faithful knight. Thought that maybe so she will appreciate and understand how he loves her. But one day something happened that fundamentally changed the situation and turned the relationship between Alice and Evan upside down. The thing is that Arthur, who was kicked out of everything, was mad at the whole world, and especially for some reason at Alice, although in fact he himself had abandoned her and thought that he did not love at all, really, just fooled around and that's all. Recently Arthur saw her walking hand in hand with a young man. They cooed and laughed. The dog was running along the road and wagging his tail. Alice's belly was already very noticeable, but it did not spoil her at all. The woman was happy, blooming, and just glowing with a smile. Not only that, the bastard found out that she was now working at Adam's bank as a consultant. He was blown away by this. What kind of a consultant is that brat? I was kicked out like a dog with my experience and knowledge, and that little whistleblower was accepted. So she had a hand in all this, and she looks like a sheep, doesn't she? Well, nothing. I'll make sure she's a sheep. No one can humiliate Arthur Emos. The man was getting more and more drunk, and was already mentally getting rid of his abuser. He didn't know why he was so angry that Alice had become happy against all odds. Arthur, he thought that she still sucks for him, and it turns out with another walks. What a bitch. The couple always went for walks with the dog at the same time on certain days. It had already become their little tradition. So on one of those days, Arthur walked up to them in the park, waiting for a long time behind the trees, and gradually drank whiskey, thinking up a plan of revenge. And then, seeing the happy trio, abruptly jumped out into the alley. He had a table knife in his hand, grinned wickedly, and walked straight at the girl. "Well, hello, my love. Did you recognize her? I see that you did not grieve for a long time after the breakup. You've already got a new boyfriend and got pregnant. What about me? Didn't you swear your love to me too? Since when did you become a consultant at a bank? Why did they take you there? Answer me, you viper." Alice, badly frightened, but his eyes did not turn away, and answered firmly, "Remember that fortune teller in the tent at the corporate party which promised you untold riches? Well, it was me. But that's not what I saw in your hand. That you wanted to bankrupt Adam and marry Betty on a settlement. And I told him all that. Isn't that so? Or did I lie about something? You got carried away, Arthur, and you cut down the tree you were sitting on. You had everything. You had a great job, a loving fiancé, but you chose lies and betrayal and hypocrisy. You're the one who told me you didn't want me, and you told me to get out. So what do you want now? Yes, I fell in love with Evan, and he's not like you, loyal and reliable. We're gonna get married soon, and we're gonna have a real family." She turned to Evan, who was taken aback by these words, and kissed him passionately. She couldn't catch her breath. Arthur was finally furious. "Ah, you bitch. You're not allowed to humiliate Arthur Emos. Remember, you're going to pay for this. You'll remember me." And he went for Alice with a knife. But then the faithful Richie bravely stood up to defend the woman, jumped up to the offender in 2 leaps, and dug his teeth into the hand with the knife. So Evan was left to twist the fluttering assailant and call the police. By this time, a crowd of onlookers had gathered around them who had seen everything that had happened, and testified that it was Arthur who had attacked the young men with a knife. The scoundrel was taken away, shouting curses at Alice and Evan, and continuing to threaten violence. The alcohol had done its work, and the man didn't know what he was doing. Alice stroked the dog and thanked him. "Thank you, my savior, my good, bravest dog. Not afraid, protected. How could I not love you?" Suddenly, Evan turned her sharply toward him and looked her straight in the eyes and asked, "Is it true what you said to your ex-boyfriend about loving me? Don't lie. It's important for me to know. Please answer me honestly. And did you just want to piss him off?" Alice sighed. "It's true. I fell in love with you a long time ago when we first met, but I was afraid to admit it. Why do you need me with someone else's child? It's such a burden and responsibility. I don't even know how I'm going to cope. I don't want to involve you in all this. You'll find yourself a nice girl, and she'll give you a baby, yours. But no matter how much I talk to myself, it's no use. I dream about you at night, to tell you the truth. And I can't do anything about it. Phew, I finally said it. Now you never want to see me again." Evan pulled Alice to him and kissed her as passionately and as long as she kissed him. "Foolish Mai. I also loved you at once, and just as idiot, was afraid to say so, you know. I thought you would misunderstand me, or you'd drive me away, or push me away. What fools we are. And the baby you're carrying is no stranger to me. He's not even born yet, and I already love him, you know. And I'll give him my last name and patronymic, and I'll raise him as my own. You know, I'm even grateful to your ex for today, or else would have been so and suffered further and did not dare to confess their feelings. That's it. That's it. That's it. You're moving in with me today. We're family now. And after the weekend, we're going to get married in a registry office. I'll introduce you to my family. I don't have a father, but I have a wonderful, kind mother and 3 brothers. They are sure to like you." Alice's heart felt so warm and good. What a happiness. Now she is not alone. She has a real family, and no longer have to suffer and hide their feelings, cry into the pillow at night. Evan's whole family accepted her very well. They bought everyone gifts and came to visit. The man introduced her like this. "Mom, brothers, I'd like you to meet her. This is Alice, my favorite woman. And we're about to have a baby boy, my son." Mom splashed her arms and immediately hugged the woman. "Oh, my son. Why did you say nothing until the last moment? That partisan. We are so happy finally, and I'll get grandchildren. Alice, come in, my daughter. Now we're going to sit down at the table. Don't be shy. We're keeping it simple. Make yourself at home. You're a part of our big family now." In the midst of the feast, Evan's mother got into a heart-to-heart talk with Alice. "You look like a good woman. Polite, not like his ex. That's where the bastard was. She turned her nose up at us and said hello every other time. Evan suffered so much with her. Because she was walking left and right, the whole neighborhood knew about it. She was being driven home drunk in different cars, and she wasn't even ashamed of it. And I kept praying that Evan would find a good woman. You won't be disappointed in him. We are simple people, not very rich, but kind and sympathetic. My boys are all great. They stand up for each other, have been working since they were little, and help me. You know how hard it was to raise 3 of them alone." From that day on, the couple started living together in Evan's apartment. It turned out that they were so similar. They had the same tastes for everything, their interests, and they almost never fought. Evan took such good care of Alice, took care of her, stroked her belly, and played music, talked to the baby to get her used to his voice. It was so adorable for Alice. "Hello, little one. It's me, your daddy. How are you? Mommy and I are waiting for you very much. And will love you very much." The woman almost cried with happiness at such moments. But the fortune-telling was over. The gift was completely gone. She could no longer read her hand. There were no visions. One day, when Evan was on shift, she went to the cemetery to visit her grandmother. She tended to it, put a fresh bouquet on the grave, wiped the dusty photo. Her grandmother looked at her like she was alive. the same kind, radiant eyes, so forgiving and understanding. God, how Alice missed her grandmother, her wise advice and exhortations. She just wanted to hug her closest person and not part with him. For a long time she sat and talked to her and asked, "Grandma, why can't I see anything anymore? Where has my gift gone?" I guessed honestly. Without cheating, I did not take money. No one hurt, no one lied. What happened? But how long she listened to no answer was not. Only the wind swayed the crown of trees and the sky frowned back to her. So without waiting for an answer, Alice finally froze and took the train home. She stared at the village houses, crooked with time, where her carefree barefoot childhood had once passed. That night, however, Alice dreamt of her grandmother. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, as in her childhood, stroking her head, and whispered, "Granddaughter, your gift is gone because you are happy now. Your soul finally calmed down. And so it should be. But you should know that if something happens, the gift will appear again and will help you. That I know for sure. I am very happy for you, and now I feel calm here. You will have a boy and then 2 girls. You will live a long and happy life with Evan. Okay, honey, I gotta go. I can't go any longer. Take care of yourself. God bless you." She crossed her as she had done when she was a little girl and wiped away a tear that had come to her eyes. Alice jumped up and scrambled around the bed. She could not believe that it was just a dream. It was as if it was real. She whispered, "Grandma, don't go away. Stay with me just a little longer, please." Frightened Evan woke up too and turned on the light. "Honey, what's wrong? Are you all pale and in a cold sweat? Did you have a nightmare? Or is it bad? Should we call an ambulance? Just tell me where it hurts. I'll be right back." He pressed her gently against him, covered her with blankets so she would not catch cold, and Alice said quietly, "To me, in a dream, grandmother came, as a living, in her colorful kerchief and her favorite polka dot bathrobe. You know, she told me that you and I will live happily ever after, and I will have a boy and 2 girls, and that you were my destiny. You know, I believe her. I feel so good with you, and I'm so scared of losing you." Evan hugged her softly and reassured her. "Don't be afraid, my love. I will not go anywhere. I will not disappear, and I will always be with you. All our troubles are behind us, and only happiness and joy are ahead. That's it, go to bed. I'll make you a sweet tea and bring you your favorite cookies." 5 months later, without any difficulties, Alice gave birth to a healthy giant, weighing 400. They named her son Thomas. When he was reattached to the mother's chest, for the first time in her life, the woman burst into tears, not from grief, but from happiness. She had no idea what joy was inside of her. She was filled with a universal love for her baby. She kissed the nose and chubby cheeks and whispered to herself, "Thank you, grandmother, for not letting them commit a sin. You've been watching over me since childhood. Here, your grandson was born. I believe you can see him from heaven and be happy for me too." At the discharge, a happy Evan proudly held the baby in his arms and told everyone, "This is Thomas, my son. He's a big boy. You can tell he's a man." He kept his word and signed his son away. No one at the hospital was even surprised. Many people congratulated him and said the boy looked just like his dad. The couple decided not to wait and had a christening a month later. The godmother was invited to be Betty, Adam's daughter. They were now very friendly, and the woman happily accepted the offer. Betty was happy for her friend, that she was lucky to find her own happiness, and she was eternally grateful to Alice, that she saved her in time from trouble and marriage to scoundrel Arthur, and the father from bankruptcy. And Evan's best friend Kostya was called to be the baby's godfather. He was a strong programmer and worked for a reputable company. It was here at the event and the relationship between the young people began. At first, they were united by the baptism of Thomas. They both felt very bad when they changed clothes and held the baby in their arms. Then they became friends, the four of them together as cousins to get together for kebabs and just on weekends, and soon Betty and Oscar also became a couple. They didn't wait too long to get married because Betty got pregnant too. Alice and Evan were now celebrating, first at a best friend's wedding, and then at a christening. Adam was happy for his daughter. Although Oscar is not a rich man, but you can tell how he loves his daughter, how he cares, and that's the most important thing. 5 years had passed, and in the family of Evan and Alice were already running around with 3 kids. All just like Grandma said, Thomas, Arlene, and Ella. They sold the apartment and bought a big house outside of town to make room for everyone. Evan was happy, so his dream of a happy family and lots of kids had come true. Alice changed from a slim, gray-eyed Arlenska into a beautiful, statuesque woman, rounded and more feminine. It was not easy. Try a whole day run and keep track of the 3 passerliatum, tired as hell, and yet late in the evening when all slept in their beds, she lovingly adjusted the blankets, kissed her favorite noses and cheeks, cleaned scattered around the house dice and cheeks, cleaned scattered around the house dice and dolls, and was perfectly happy after all. Motherhood is a woman's greatest calling, no matter what anyone says. Evan was a great husband and a real head of the household. Alice was like a stone wall behind him. All sorts of things happened, and resentments and tears sometimes, but every time Evan always first came up to his wife, hugged her and whispered in her ear, "I still love you even though you're an insufferable wretch sometimes, but I do not need anyone else." From these warm and sincere words of his, she became so good and warm in her heart. Immediately all resentment and anger faded away. She embraced her husband in return and also whispered, "I love you too much. Let's make up." Richie was the family favorite. Now he had someone to play with and play catch with. He adored the kids and let them do whatever they wanted with him. All tolerated and ride them on horseback. The kids squealed with delight, and they loved their pet too. Alice did not regret that her gift was gone and never returned. But she gained much more: love, a husband, children, and a house, in which happiness settled for many years. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.